Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our final presentation of the day. At the end of this presentation, our last raffle will take place, as you can see over there on the cart. We will even cart it out to your vehicle. We will not get it out of your car and take it into your home. You're on your own with that one. But this is for a Furman P03503 recoil start 120 volt with cover 4550/3550 watt single fuel portable generator, a fuel can, and I looked at it, it was a 50-foot extension cord, so you'll be able to get it far enough away from your house like they talked about during the fire presentation today. Make sure it's 20 feet away from your home. Donated by Lowe's of St. Lucie West. One more time, we want to thank Samson Tree Service for being our title sponsor this year. They've been in business for over 32 years and provide professional tree trimming and debris hauling. So without further ado, our final presenter today from the WPEC weather team, Michael Ehrenberg.
All right, well, hello, everybody. Thanks for coming to the Port St. Lucie Hurricane Expo. Wow, we got a big crowd here. Usually there's not many people in the 1 o'clock presentation, but I'm glad you guys came. Obviously, hurricane preparation is a really big, important part of living here in South Florida. And I know I met a lot of you folks that have just moved here from either, Fort Lauderdale or Montana. I met some folks from the Northeast, so it's good that you guys are coming out here and getting prepared for the hurricane season. And knock on, for Mike or whatever, we don't have any storms this year. Of course, last season was a rough one out there. I'm going to go over a little bit of that, what the season was last year, and then this year. Pull hard. There we go. Okay, and kind of talk about preparation, a little bit of stuff that would be good to know. Okay, so last year we're going to go over. It was a busy season. It's a very weird season. We had basically no storms for 6 weeks from about mid-August until mid-September, which is very unusual. But as you can see there, Florida and the Gulf Coast area got, unfortunately, the brunt of everything. 5 landfalling hurricanes in the Gulf Coast region, and 3 of those were right over the state of Florida, including, who could forget, Helene, which moved through the Panhandle area during the July time period, and then, of course, we got impacted directly here with Milton in October. Milton caused a huge tornado outbreak that occurred, which just caused lots of problems for the area. Milton, you might recall, made landfall October 9th, and that was right near Tampa, 5 miles west of Sarasota, with 120-mile-an-hour winds. So it was a Category 3 hurricane with a lowest pressure of 954 millibars. Interesting thing, we basically had impacts from Milton when the storm was hundreds of miles offshore in the Gulf of Mexico, and once it made landfall, most of our impacts were pretty much winding down. The big impacts, of course, were that Midwestern and Great Plains type tornado outbreak. There were 126 tornado warnings and over 45 confirmed tornadoes in the state of Florida, and you can see all those warning boxes up there, and a lot of them were draped across St. Lucie and also the areas up there towards Indian River County, of course in the Palm Beach County vicinity. And there are some of the tracks we had, and that EF3 was up there in the Fort Pierce vicinity. That yellow line, probably still people having their houses damaged and are still waiting for repairs. And then down there in the West Palm Beach area, west of West Palm, there was another EF3 tornado, and keep in mind that's 136 to 165 mile-an-hour winds. This is a track of the tornado down, of course this is closer to our station in West Palm Beach, but this was a 21-mile length, max width 300 yards, and it was 140 mile-an-hour winds in that storm, impacting Wellington, the Acreage, Palm Beach Gardens, and Jupiter Farms. Nowadays, with all the traffic cameras and everybody with cell phone cameras, we had a lot of vivid evidence of these tornadoes, and we were on the air for 9 straight hours with tornado warnings. It was very tough for us at the station, but we got through it, and it was definitely something that's for the record books. Hopefully, don't have an outbreak like that ever again. Very unusual to get EF3 tornadoes and so many in such a in one day in South Florida. So what about this season? We all want to know that, looking ahead. So I'm sure you've heard some of the forecasts already. The average amount of storms in a 30-year period. Keep in mind the average is the previous decades, wherever it stopped, and you go back 30 years. So 1981 to 2020, In the Atlantic Basin, there's been 14 named storms. 7 of those have become hurricanes, and three major hurricanes. Colorado State comes up with their forecast, and their last forecast, I think, was back in April, 17, 9, and 4, and that fits right into what NOAA has forecasted, which includes the Hurricane Center of 13 to 19 named storms, 6 to 10 of those becoming hurricanes, and 3 to 5 of those becoming major hurricanes. Now, this is an above average season. NOAA comes up with probabilities. There's a 60% chance it'll be above normal, 30% near normal, 10% below normal. But I always tell people the forecasts really they don't mean much. It could be a very busy season and we don't get hit, and they'll come up to me, Micah, I thought it was going to be a bad season, but well, not necessarily. This is for the entire Atlantic. And also, it could be a very quiet season and you get hit. The big precedent for that is Andrew back in 1992. I think there were only like 8 or 9 named storms, and Andrew hit down in South Miami-Dade, and it was the worst season ever for them. So numbers don't mean a whole lot regarding the forecast. If you're the one that gets hit, you think it's bad. If you're the one that gets hit, you don't think it's bad. It's just kind of gives us some broad indication of what it could be during the entire Atlantic. And again, that's over the entire Atlantic, which is the Caribbean, the Gulf, and all areas in between. So why is NOAA forecasting a busier than average season? Well, we look at a couple factors. And so conditions, reduced wind shear, favors storm development. Now, we're going to kind of be in what we call a neutral phase. So there's really not going to be much of an El Nino or a La Nina, and more on that in a moment. So the wind shear issue, I don't think is going to be a big deal. The biggest thing that's going to contribute to the above average season are those warmer than average ocean temperatures. And we've been having that for 10, 15 years. Every year it seems like the water's getting to record heat. A lot of this is due to global climate change. There's going to be a lot of activity in the western African monsoon. That's off the coast of Africa. We got those powerful tropical waves that come across, and they make that long trek across the Atlantic and then into the Caribbean and then come up sometimes towards Florida. And so there's going to be more waves than normal. So you get all those waves out there. You get the warmer than normal ocean temperatures, which is the fuel for developing hurricanes. Hence, it's going to be a busier than average season out there. So what exactly is El Nino and La Nina? We've heard a lot of that. El Nino is basically the warm water temperatures in the Pacific. And you'll notice right there, this is the Eastern Pacific. And then La Nina are cool water temperatures in the Eastern Pacific. You might be thinking, well, what does that have to do with us here in Port St. Lucie? Why do we care about that? Well, it has implications, thousands of miles away, okay? This is a map of El Nino, and you can see here, it's a little hard to see probably from where you're sitting, but with El Nino, with all that warm water, you get a lot of rising motion in the Eastern Pacific, and then it comes up, and then there's a lot of sinking motion in the Atlantic Ocean, okay? When you get sinking motion, that's a negative for hurricane development. It's a positive for us because we don't want to see that. Now, during La Nina, you're going to get sinking air out there in the Pacific due to the cooler water temperatures, and that's going to translate to rising motion in the Atlantic Basin, okay? And that usually also correlates with reduced wind shear. But remember, there really isn't much of a signal for either one of these this year, so this isn't really one of the main things that's driving the forecast for this hurricane season. Again, it's those warmer than normal ocean temperatures, and it is, again, all those tropical waves that are going to be coming off the African coast. Speaking of the sea surface temperature, this is an anomaly map right now, and wherever you see those oranges, the darker the orange, the darker the red, the higher the water temperatures are above average. Above average. These are the anomalies. And you can see, except for up in the North Atlantic, where we don't care because storms already passed us, everybody's above average, and really, especially in the Gulf and the Caribbean down there. And so that's the breeding ground for storms usually in the month of June and July. Here's a forecast for the European model, and this shows the anomaly for July through September. And in this area, this is the main development region. You can see white, which is near normal, and then yellow, which is 0.2 to 0.5 degrees above average. So just a little bit above average. Again, this is one model, and it's a forecast for several months. But again, it's the warmer than average ocean temperatures which fuel storms. They can make them stronger and longer lasting and more destructive. Something else that we have to consider is that dust I'm sure you've heard about this over the last few days, the Saharan dust, the African dust that comes from 5,000 miles away off the coast of Africa. You get some tropical waves coming to the coast of Africa. There's a lot of wind. Remember, there's a lot of sand in Africa, the Sahel region, the Sahara Desert. That sand gets lofted up into the atmosphere, and it travels all the way across the Atlantic and sometimes into our skies. And we're seeing that right now. I don't know if you saw that when I was driving up here. It's hazy. You don't have a nice bright blue sky. It looks brownish. The sun might be shining, but it's not as strong as it would normally be. So that Saharan dust is known to limit tropical development in the Atlantic. It can also limit thunderstorm development over our area, and that's why we have very low rain chances for today and tomorrow, that and high pressure overhead. Okay, so the way it does this is the sand can kind of dry out the atmosphere. You need moisture for hurricanes to develop. It can stabilize the atmosphere by cooling. It kind of blocks the sun, so it doesn't get as hot at the ground. Hence, you don't have a big temperature difference between the ground and aloft, and that's what we call the stable situation in the weather. So we do like that, and sometimes a scatter light can produce vivid sunrises and sunsets. Now, the dust has been in our atmosphere for the last several days. Thing is, most of the time, and I don't think this is a case either, you don't smell it. There really isn't an air quality. I checked the air quality index yesterday in the area, and it was good. So the dust is a mile or more above us, and it's sometimes 2 to 2.5 miles thick. So at least we don't really have to deal with that dust getting down to the ground, unless perhaps you get a big thunderstorm where you get downdrafts and some of that dust is brought down, but then again, the rain kind of washes that out of the atmosphere anyway, all right? So here are the hurricane names. Andrea, Barry, Chantel, a good, for the second year in a row now, we have had no pre-season storms, which is good. We had a string of several years in a row where we would have storms in May and April. I'm like, oh my goodness, what kind of a season is this? We're not even in the hurricane season yet, but we have not had a named storm yet. Cross your fingers. So let's hope that goes on for quite a while. And these are the secondary hurricane names. I think only twice in Atlantic history you had to go, we exhausted the list of names, and then we had to go into the secondary list. So these are the names that we have if we go through all 21 names. There's 26 letters in the alphabet, but there's only 21 names. The reason, I guess, is because how many names start with Q or X or odd, so they just don't really bother to put those names in there. We rarely get up to there anyway. So anyway, that's the secondary name, and hopefully, again, we don't get past that because it would be a very busy season indeed. This is interesting. This comes out of Colorado State from their forecast. They really dive down in and do an analysis, okay? And what you're looking at here is on the left, this is the probability in the entire state of Florida that a named storm will pass within 50 miles of the entire state. Now think about that. I mean, there's usually storms in the Gulf, off the Atlantic, the Keys. So obviously that probability is very high. There's a 92% chance of a named storm pretty much passing anywhere near the state of Florida, okay? And that doesn't mean here. It could be in the Panhandle. It could be, in the Big Bend or Tampa. But a 92% chance and a 65% chance that it'd be a hurricane and a 35% chance that it would be a major hurricane. And you notice those numbers are above climatology, which is the 30-year average, all right? Here's another stat. They actually break it down by county. So here in St. Lucie County, there's a 43% chance that in this season, we're going to have a named storm, a tropical storm or higher, pass within 50 miles of the coast. It's less than 50%, but it's fairly high if you think about it, right? In Indian River County, it's 44%, and again, above the climatological average. Palm Beach County, it goes up to 50%, 50-50 chance that there might be some impacts from a tropical storm this year. So those numbers, I think, are high enough for anybody out there to say, hey, wait a minute, I really should be prepared because we're probably going to get at least something, even if it's just a tropical storm, or it could be a hurricane or more than that, which is interesting. This is actually the hurricane return period. How many years do you have to go between hurricane landfalls on average? And in this year, in this area, it's 8. Every 8 years, you're going to be impacted by a hurricane, all right? Hurricane season, for those of you new here, you probably know that most of the time here in June and July, we don't have to worry all that much. The storms are weaker, and we rarely get impacts. And plus, and in general, there aren't a lot of systems in the Atlantic Basin, but here, these are all the big names that have hit Florida here, and there's been a whole bunch: Charlie, Idalia, Gene, I don't even have last year's Milton on here. I didn't get a chance to update it, but Milton would be occurring somewhere in here. Michael hit the Panhandle 2018, and that was like the strongest Gulf hurricane so late in the season. That was a Category 5. So, yeah, or early August through the end of October, that's kind of the big period that, you got to make sure you're extra vigilant about hurricanes. And the peak, of course, is September 10th. I'm going to go back to that in a moment. The peak for the entire Atlantic Basin is September 10th. But the peak for South Florida is actually September 25th. You might not know this, but half of all landfalling hurricanes in South Florida have occurred after September 25th. So October is pretty busy, and you can see Wilma, Michael, Ian all occurred in October. And of course, let's go back to Milton just last year. June, we typically see development in the northern Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico, and off the southeast coast of the U.S. In September, that shifts towards the long track Cape Verde hurricanes off the African coast, and they go all the way across. And this is where they curve around the Bermuda High, and it depends on how strong it is or whatnot. And Florida is pretty much in the crosshairs in September. October, we kind of get rid of the Cape Verde hurricanes, and it's, again, focused back into the Gulf of Mexico and off the southeast coast of the U.S. because, again, the water temperatures are hottest there the longest. Somebody asked me today about evacuation routes and if they're in evacuation routes. So here is St. Lucie County. Okay, and you'll notice, of course, all the barrier islands are going to be under evacuation zone. Zone A, which is, minimal hurricane and on up. But notice here, going up the St. Lucie River, I mean, you're well inland from the ocean, but there's still some evacuation routes as far west as the Florida Turnpike, nothing as far west as I-95. But again, you could get storm surge coming in from the Atlantic, and that's what the hurricane evacuation zones are based on, is are you going to get storm surge? So all along the river here and well up to Port St. Lucie, there's still an evacuation zone, River Park and whatnot, which is very interesting. You don't have to just be on the coast. If you're on a river, you could be in an evacuation zone. And then here's a look at Martin County further south, and again, the same kind of thing where you're looking at, the St. Lucie River well inland here, you're going to evacuation zones. And then further down here towards Jupiter Island and further inland as far west as almost I-95 down in the southern parts of Martin County. And Zone A is, that's going to be all mobile homes. And, there's different zones go further inland with the different, the higher impacts of a hurricane, the stronger they are. So here we are in June, and it's great that you're all here at the Hurricane Expo, so you can get prepared, and it's good that you're vigilant, you're doing the right things here. So here's a little bit of a graphic which says, ready, set, go. 5 to 7 days before a hurricane comes, put your hurricane kit together. But you can do that now. You could have a hurricane plan ready to activate. Really, even now, you can do all this stuff. These are things that you can do months ahead of time. If you're in the cone, that will be 3 to 5 days out. Activate your plan, prepare property, and be ready to leave. And then 1 to 3 days, evacuate from the coast if ordered, if inland, shelter from wind and rain. A lot of people, ask, well, I'm not in an evacuation zone. Should I just go? I think that depends up to the individual situation. Let's say you're not in an evacuation zone, and maybe a lot of you are retired, and you don't have a generator. You don't want to deal with no power and no gas and no air conditioning for days on end. If you have the means to get out and get away, before the traffic starts, you could do that, or get on a plane and just get out of town. I know a friend of mine, they've got a generator, but they say, well, we just, when hurricane's coming, we just go up to New York and stay there and with friends or whatever. They see Broadway shows or something. If you can get out of town, that's great, if you have the means to do that. But other than that, if you're not in an evacuation zone and you made your preparations, you do want to stay put, because you don't want to be stuck in traffic. You don't want to impede the people that need to get out that aren't in evacuation zones from being able to do that. There was a huge evacuation back in '99. I think it was Floyd was approaching. It was a Category 5, and it was forecast to turn away at the last minute, just like Dorian did several years ago. But there's just a massive jam up on I-95 and the Turnpike. They reversed the lane. The southbound lanes became the northbound lanes as well. So, but again, it's really tough. You don't want to be stuck in traffic when it's coming. So here are some things you can do now regarding the hurricane checklist. 1 gallon per person per day for 7 days. I have another graphic that says 3 gallons. I just like to go to Costco and get the pallet of 40 waters and get a few of those. That'll last you a while. Non-perishable food, things you can have, canned tuna fish, peanut butter, have a can opener, soups, all those things that you can keep throughout the hurricane season that aren't going to go bad. Fill up prescriptions, take out cash. You probably do that more like, when you're just getting into the cone, or even if you think we might be getting in the cone soon. Resupply that first aid kit. Battery-powered lights and NOAA. I had a few people ask me about NOAA radio today. I think the most important thing nowadays is we've all got the phones. We're all getting weather information there, or a lifeline with the communication. So get those little battery-powered packs. I remember last year or 2 years ago, I went to Brandsmart. I guess for $7, I got a thing that charges your phone twice. Have a bunch of those. Have them charged up. Order them on Amazon. Go to a Brandsmart or Best Buy, and that way you have power. Because remember, when that power goes out, you can't charge your phone, and once it goes down, you're going to want to be on that a lot to get weather information. So have a bunch of battery-powered backups ready to go for your phones. These are things you can do now. Trim your trees around the home. You don't want branches and things falling out of your roof. Purchase plywood, steel, aluminum panels. That is, if you are putting shutters up like that. Just a show of hands here, how many people have shutters that require a lot of work, like aluminum panels or putting up wood or vinyl panels? Okay, not many. How many of you how many here have either the impact glass or the things you roll down or just close up? Which looks like most of you, which is good. So, modern technology is making it a lot easier nowadays to prepare for a hurricane, all right? I still have the aluminum panels, and it takes like several hours to put them up. So good for you guys that don't have to do that. And also help your neighbor out. This is a time where I think the community all comes together. You want to help collect supplies, assist with shutters and evacuations and things like that, and you want to check on each other afterwards, all right? CBS 12 hurricane reality. I'm going to go into this in just a little bit. I remember during Francis and Jean, for Francis, we were on the air for 102 hours straight. Do the math, that's more than 4 days. And typically we have 12-hour shifts at our shop, okay? And I'm pretty much like 2 p.m. to 2 a.m., all right? And it's a lot for us to do. Meals and sleeping quarters are provided, which is good. I always like to go home. I live close by. A lot of caffeine and fatigue. And through it all, though, we like to service the community. We kind of feel good about it. A lot of people are watching. Most people watch local TV news. The most times they watch it are during the severe episodes, especially during hurricanes and tornadoes. Fewer and fewer people are watching news nowadays, Austin, the other stations, but this is when everybody watches, and we try to be at our best. We have to have a lot of patience with one another, and again, we are definitely happy to serve the community out there. And there's our team. I've been with CBS 12 for about, I think it's going to be, I think I've lost track here. Is it 26 years this year? Amazing. Lauren's been with us for about 8 or 9. Vitas Reed is our chief. He came down from Baltimore. He's been with Sinclair for a while, and he's been with us for about 5 years. And Jennifer Collins, she's out there at the booth. I'm sure you've met her already. And she's been with us for several years. And Charlotte's our newest meteorologist, been with us for about 1.5 years. And I'm going to do a little time check here. So 1:30, we're giving away the generator, right? Anybody have any questions here? Questions, comments, concerns? Yes, you in the back there in the white shirt.
At what point does the storm get named 60 miles an hour?
At what point does a storm get named? Well, the storm will get named when it becomes a tropical storm, which is winds of 39 miles an hour or higher. And it keeps that name through hurricane and major hurricane status. All right? Yes?
Check.
Right. I'm sorry, repeat that again? What are
Can
they?
we just second?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, that's a good idea.
With the possible reduction of staff at the National Weather Service, how difficult is it going to be for you to predict the hurricanes coming our way?
That's a really good question. That's been in the news a lot lately with budgetary cuts and layoffs. There's two things that come to mind here. we've already seen that sometimes across some weather service offices in the nation, because of lack of staffing, they've had to suspend their balloon launches. Balloons are launched twice a day from a bunch of National Weather Service offices to go high up in the atmosphere. They take measurements of temperature, pressure, wind, and moisture, and that information is fed into the computer forecast models, the spaghetti plots you've seen. And if we don't have some of that critical data that comes in there, there's a chance that the steering patterns might not be as accurately forecasted and modeled as they could be. So that is a concern, that there could be some degradation in accuracy of these steering patterns that steer hurricanes. And a lot of times we get troughs or jet stream dips that come down through the US, and they're going to impact a storm that's coming in from the Caribbean or the Gulf of Mexico. So it is a bit of a concern. And also, I'm not sure if, I've read where sometimes some of the flights that go in, the NOAA hurricane hunters in the Air Force, there might not be as many research missions that go in there as you would normally get. Now, I can't say for sure whether that's going to happen or not, but that would be a concern for us meteorologists. I mean, yeah, it is a concern. Hopefully it won't be a big concern. Hopefully the powers that be will not suspend the flights and not suspend the critical balloon launches that we need. Sometimes extra balloon launches are made in critical areas to get better accuracy. So we'll see. Anything more? Yes, you, sir.
How long does it take to evacuate?
How long does it take to evacuate? Well, it can take a few days. If all of a sudden you decide to go at the last minute, then 995 or the Turnpike or US 1 is all jammed up. So if you're going to evacuate, you want to make that decision as far ahead of landfall as possible. And every situation is different.
Tess. And then from the emergency management side, that's why we encourage you to go tens of miles, not hundreds and thousands of miles. If you live on the coast, if you can get 10 miles inland to a friend's place, a hotel, something like that, you're perfectly fine. You don't have to go to Orlando. You definitely don't want to go to Atlanta.
Right.
Because guess what? When you want to come back, you can't get back. Because they'll have the roads closed, letting all the support come into Florida from FEMA and all that. They'll close the roads. You won't come back unless you fly in a helicopter.
Right. We got a guy over there. I don't know if you want to bring the microphone over there or not, or speak loudly.
What are the chances of cell phone towers going down during a storm? And if so, what forms of communication would be best?
What are the chances of cell phone towers going down? Well, I'm not a cell phone expert, but I would think that, there's been a lot of effort done to harden these towers. The tower isn't going to go down. The issue is the power going to go out at one of these cell phone towers and not be able to transmit the signals? So that's always the case, but I would hope that these cell phone providers and people that run these towers have backup generators at these towers. Not to say there won't be some degradation in service. I guess, texting is always, there's a better chance of a text going through than a voice message, but nowadays so few of us talk on the phone anymore. So,
All right.
yeah, there could be.
Yeah, and just to partially answer that, they do have generators
Right.
on all their towers now. Doesn't mean that it's still not going to lose power, because
Yeah.
generator, it may work, it may not, because they're automatic, right? So if it doesn't work, it may go down for an hour until that technician gets out there and gets it to start manually. If they do go out, like if an Ian situation that happened like in Fort Myers area, now they went out, they didn't come back, and what happened was within a day, those cell providers, they have trucks that they launch, what are those called, drones and balloons, like a blimp, that will sit over the city and provide, it acts as a cell tower. And then your phones start working again, then they can provide those. We see them at like the hurricane conferences and stuff, and we're like, wow, it's amazing what they can do. And they're like, oh yeah, we can bring these in, we fly the drones 12 hours on, 12 hours off while they're charging, and that way it keeps cell phone service working wherever you're at. And we're like, awesome. All right, so thank you once again to Michael Ehrenberg with CBS 12 News team.
Thanks for coming, everybody. Now the moment we've all been waiting for, right?
Yep, everybody get your tickets out. It's generator time.
It sounds like a great prize. I'm not looking here. I have nothing to do with this. I'm just picking the ticket. Here we go. Scramble it up nicely.
All right.
All right, everybody got their ticket out, ready to go? All right, 3963043. 3963043. Anybody?
You got that, sir?
Oh, the man got over there?
All right.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Congrats, okay.
Let's let him verify
What a
the ticket real
generator.
quick.
All right. Yeah, you got to do
Because
that.
I've had that happen before
Oh,
where
boy.
they transpose the numbers.
Right, right.
Is it the right one, Rolando?
Oh,
All right, we're
look
good.
at that. That's nice. Wow.
Once again, we want to thank you all for coming to our 19th Annual Hurricane Preparedness Expo.
Thank you.
As we've had going up on the screen all day, if you need more information, especially if you're a city resident, you can go to cityofpsl.com/hurricane. You will find a lot of the stuff we've talked about today, evacuation zones, links to that, links to your flood zones, lots of information about how to make a kit, stay informed, what different ways you can use here in the city to stay informed. We appreciate you coming and look forward to seeing you again next year. Have a safe year.